Space is the last known frontier, and beyond the stars are extraterrestrial villains that want nothing more than to bring the universe to its knees.
In this case, all the threats both heroes Samus Aran and Ben 10 have faced, these two cunning, brutal, resilient, and fearsome cybernetically enhanced tyrants are amongst their greatest foes.
So, who will conquer their way to victory? Is it the cunning god of death, Ridley?
Or the galactic warlord of 10 worlds, Vilgax?
I'm MikeG.
And I'm How To Playlist.
And welcome to Dream Battles. In the vast universe, the history of humanity is but a flash of light from a lone star among trillions of others. One light that burns brighter than all. This is the light of a small girl named Samus Aran. But where there is a light, there is a darkness that follows like moths drawn to a flame. And once this darkness came to engulf the light was the result of a successful raid leading to the destruction of an entire colony named K2L, as well as the death of Samus's mother and father. The short term was a success, but the long term of this hateful, traumatic event gave birth to a galactic bounty hunter set on revenge to fight back against the extraterrestrials. But mostly the culprit. And that threat is none other than the infamous purple space pirate, Ridley. The two would engage in battle many times over the years, but as a result, Ridley would not only suffer his first defeat, but a near-death experience. He would, however, cheat death and face Samus over and over again, and he did this so much so that he gained the title as the Cunning God of Death. But despite these defeats, he never went down without a really good fight, as Ridley is a fierce and deadly powerful creature whose entire structure is built to be a living weapon. Being armed with long razor-sharp claws that can cut the strongest of man-made metals, massive teeth that allow him to rip apart and bite down on his adversaries, a long spear-like tail that is capable of extending vast distances, used for whipping around, impaling a target, or most infamously perform fast and ferocious pogo stick-like attacks from above. Ridley also has primary types of offensive breath attacks, which are plasma and fire. With both, he can fire them in different forms, such as a chain of balls which he can enlarge for much larger and stronger orbs, short burst blast, a widespread flood of fire, or a concentrated beam of destruction that has decimated mountains and spacecrafts. Now, in addition to being a dragon pterosaur-like creature, he can take to the sky and fly. His aerial control is smooth and has mastered evasion while in the air, which he has demonstrated on several occasions while facing fleets or Samus Aran herself. Plus, when moving at high speeds, can reach faster than the speed of light, as shown by keeping up with Samus' ship, which flies at light speeds. He also possesses immense strength that has allowed him to carry Samus around like nothing, tear through entire ships without the use of his plasma breath, shake the entirety of a spacecraft with just a whip of his tail smacking the floor, and toss massive creatures larger than himself. Durability-wise, Ridley is an extreme tank who can withstand incredibly strong blunt force impacts, extreme pressures, and is unfazed by most of Samus's weapons, which include missiles, super missiles, and charged shots. The only weapons Samus has that can truly harm Ridley are her power bombs, as they burn away living cells. But more impressively, he's even survived his own ship careening into him, thus setting off a massive explosion, and is unfazed by extreme temperatures, as proven by his ability to survive the heat of the explosion and even submerging himself in lava. Also, let's keep in mind that characters like Ridley and Samus are able to get around and perform impressive feats of speed, strength, and durability in gravity 960 times stronger than Earth's, which is insanely impressive. Now, to me, the most fascinating aspect of Ridley is his skin, as Ridley is capable of changing the pigments of his skin or hardening it for extra defense. This pigmentation manipulation, similar to that of the Irex from Jurassic World, also enables Ridley to camouflage with his surroundings. While in this invisible state, Ridley's speed gains a slight boost, and while changing the density of his skin, his attacks become slightly stronger. In addition, he has also shown capable enough to be adept at survival by consuming living things to heal. Although he doesn't prefer the taste of humans, he will consume them if need be to survive a near-death experience. Thus, despite appearing to be a bloodthirsty monster who seeks to cause death and destruction everywhere he goes, making him appear to be seemingly mindless, Ridley is actually a super genius and an immense tactician who wins many battles against other powerful monsters through clever strategy alone, whether it be by mocking or playing mind games with his prey. Ridley is also capable of exploiting weaknesses when possible, which makes him a survivalist in the worst of situations, as to be expected with someone like Ridley. His experience in tactics is on almost every level, from a personal vendetta to galactic and also technological, as he actually built a perfect robot duplicate of himself that was used when he wasn't present with the space pirates in battle. However, despite his absurd power and raw cunning, Ridley still could not overcome Samus Aran's skills and various arsenal of weaponry. There, his loyal space pirates recovered his remains, and once resurrected again, Ridley would finally try and become stronger and stronger to better oppose Samus Aran. And he did this all with his intellectual genius and cybernetically engineering himself to become what you guys know as Meta Ridley, a flying cyborg of terror in the sky. As Meta Ridley, he could now fly through space without the assistance of a vessel with his new wings, and was built with layers of extremely durable armor. In addition, early tests showed huge improvements in mobility, strength, speed, durability, and insane offensive power and capabilities. The weapons built into this cyborg monster include a kinetic breath, stronger forms of fire and plasma, a meson bomb launcher that drops bombs powerful enough to lay waste to landscapes, an ultra-thermal flame strike projector which creates a devastating fire shockwave, a multi-missile system which fires a volley of missiles which have honing capabilities, and he gained a limited amount of earth manipulation by stabbing his tail into the floor, which creates a chain of sharp rocks that emerge from the ground up. However, during this time, Samus Aran had discovered that Ridley, along with the space pirates, had been conducting experiments using Phazon, and encountering those corrupted by Phazon, including later on Ridley himself, who despite his new power as Meta Ridley, was defeated and left for dead. But Phazon pushed things to the next level for our cunning god of death. Phazon, referred to as the Great Poison, is a highly radioactive, mutagenic, and semi-sentient substance that is capable of self-replication. It exists in many different forms because it's meant to corrupt ecosystems and all living and technological things around it. And since it releases unique forms of radiation, exposure to any amount of it is deadly, as most life forms that come into contact with this substance will die within mere moments, and on some occasions can even corrupt the dead into the undead. However, those who survive and are exposed for a longer period of time do not die, but are horribly mutated with their minds completely destroyed. When infused with Phazon and becoming Omega Ridley, he is energized to a new combat level, as he retains all of the same abilities as he did in his meta state, and his power grows immensely. Increasing widely in strength while sacrificing a lot of speed, he also gains even more durable armor and Phazon enhanced armor skin, which does cover all vulnerable weak spots. In addition, compared to his previous state, Omega Ridley is clearly far more powerful and armed with more devastating weapons, as he can now fire an enhanced version of his kinetic breath, which also shoots a massive red beam of plasma and fire all at once, along with an upgraded and stronger version of the Meson bomb launcher, ultra-thermal flame projector, fire countless honing fireballs, giant fireballs, fire phazon from his mouth and tail, coat his claws with phazon, and create an electric cage structure that traps targets if caught in the electrical shockwave. With all this power as Omega Ridley, he could also contend with Samus at her strongest as well. Even though Phazon was slowly making its way through her body, she could still hone Phazon as a weapon using special suits, which compared to prior would have killed Ridley a lot easier. Yeah, Samus is really badass. But Ridley is an absolute monster, and really only Samus has been the only living thing that can take Ridley down. And that's because Ridley, aside from the Metroid Prime, is literally the most feared being in his universe, as he's managed to lead numerous successful raids across the galaxy in the name of the Space Pirates, which were previously led by the Mother Brain, is one out of 3 beings in the universe to survive a Metroid attack, and despite some drawbacks, cannot be killed when exposed to Phazon, which we know only makes him far more powerful. In addition, he not only defeated Samus in their first encounter and fought her to a draw, but nearly killed Samus until a Metroid interfered and gave the Galactic Bounty Hunter a chance to recuperate and keep fighting, thus finally resulting in Ridley finally dying for good. Yeah, Ridley is extremely formidable and invincible against most, but even with a title like God of Death, he couldn't exactly avoid death every single time. As in some cases where Ridley was defeated or killed, it usually required the assistance of his loyal space pirates to retrieve their leader or bring him back to life and become stronger in the process. But even despite being stronger and drastically different, his opponent was not. The only difference in Samus really was the level of power, the unique benefits of certain armors such as being resistant to Phazon, or at some points the type of energy she would wield like Phazon. But she otherwise possessed the same traits and abilities overall, and still Ridley would fall to the mighty bounty hunter. And despite being very cunning and able to command an army or build a replica of himself, Ridley is very arrogant, cocky, and not a skilled combatant like Samus, which leaves him vulnerable in battle. These vulnerable spots include the mouth and chest, which can be easily targeted and exposed. The mouth attacks stun him, and his chest is the key spot leading to his eventual defeat in the end. And when he is harmed or unable to face his opponent, he can be easily angered and enter an animalistic state in which a clever or skilled opponent can exploit his vulnerabilities even further. In addition to this animalistic state, the Phazon not only decreases his speed, but it does attack his mind, thus making him more mindless like the rest of those infected by Phazon. But overall, if the purple space dragon were to by some miracle cheat death once more, expect bodies to stack higher, as another world is soon to fall, leading to the destruction of all life being brought down by the cunning god of death, Ridley.
The universe is so unimaginably large and possibly teeming with an almost infinite supply of worlds and life forms. One of these worlds is a home to a species called Galvin, and amongst their tiny race is one of the most brilliant minds in history, Azimuth, who is a very respected scientist, thanks to his creations and inventions, including his greatest, the Omnitrix, a tulip piece he created on act of repentance following the destruction of his previous creation, Ascalon, a weapon of horrific power. The purpose of the Omnitrix was to gain an understanding across the universe by allowing its user to transform into any alien life form. But like any object, there was much interest for those who wanted to use it for their own benefits. But there was one who had the most dark intentions. a big bad monstrosity that sends shivers of fear into the hearts of many across the universe. His name? Vilgax. This green tyrant had witnessed the power of the Omnitrix and became obsessed with it.
The Omnitrix shall be mine, and there is not a being in the galaxy that dares stand in my way.
So, with his own skill, he created a robotic army with access to the DNA of different alien races, all of them being under his control with only one goal in mind: total universal domination. The result was a mission to Earth that failed due to being strapped to a nuclear warhead which detonated. Vilgax had survived the blast, and it didn't stop his wish to acquire the Omnitrix. Thus, he had undergone a transformation thanks to a healing tank, cybernetic enhancement surgery, and became a super powerful cyborg. With this new body, Vilgax went to be a force to be reckoned with, to an unstoppable killing machine. As before this transformation, Vilgax did not truly possess that much power. Just his agility, combative skills, enhanced senses of smell, hearing, and sight, as well as the ability to breathe underwater. But due to these enhancements, Vilgax had not only become much taller, but gained an insane amount of power. Vilgax has gone toe-to-toe with Ben's most physically imposing aliens, such as Forearm. In addition, he's also powered out of Stinkfly's goo, charged through Diamond Head's crystal construct, knocked out Kevin 11 with only a few punches, and destroyed one of the heads of Mount Rushmore with total ease. Also, while it's not canon to the original series, Gax from the reboot is very similar to Vilgax, and the feats that he has performed tell us that Vilgax is possibly even stronger than Gax, as Gax does not possess the same modifications as Vilgax himself has, which means anything Gax has accomplished, Vilgax can do even better. This is also true as one of the modifications allows Vilgax to augment his strength by using the steroid boosters implanted in his arm. When using these boosters, he adds more height and bulk to his already impressive stature and doubles his weight to ridiculous levels. This strength is also complemented by his shocking speed, which allows him to leap far distances. The most impressive feats of speed are him keeping up with the likes of Ben's aliens, Accelerate and Jet Ray, which are capable at moving at light speed. Plus, adding to this insane speed and strength, Vilgax's difficulty to defeat or kill in battle is bolstered by his insane durability that is so extreme that he is pretty much impervious to blunt force attacks, giant explosions, and energy blast from even the likes of Chromastone, who lets off high levels of radiation. Now, in addition to the attacks from the likes of Kevin 11 and others, Vilgax has taken blows from Ben's strongest aliens such as Forearms, Humongosaur, and even was thrown like a baseball by Waybig into the vacuum of space. He's even withstood punches from Diamond Head, whose hands shatter upon impact, tanked an attack from Accelerate running at top speeds, and was not harmed by the Omnitrix's feedback energy blast. He's also immune to all fire and heat, as he's been submerged in lava, withstood Swampfire's blast, and even Heat Blast's most powerful heat wave with no signs of damage shown. Now, similar to how an octopus can regrow its limbs, Vilgax also possesses an ability that adds to his durability, called entropathy. Now, this ability allows the user to communicate with their own cellular structure and DNA chains to adapt to the harshness of situations and environment. And we know Vilgax can do this because he was able to speak to Ben's alien Upgrade and shrug off a plumber weapon that was designed to destroy his personal DNA. And while that did affect his base form at that time, it was no longer an issue in his new cybernetic body. Furthermore, he has on many occasions endured DNA waves from the Omnitrix itself, which has a tendency to mutate whatever it comes in contact with, merging it with DNA of random species from the Watch. But it never affected Vilgax at all. However, after so many failed attempts, the cybernetic enhancements were just not doing it, so he had them all removed, entered his new base form, and became his most powerful yet, by defeating and absorbing the powers of 10 champions. With this new power, he can shoot optic blasts from his eyes, which are very similar to Darkseid's Omega Beams in that they can change direction to pursue wherever they want to go. These beams are very powerful and have proven to cut down trees, destroy houses, shatter Gwen's powerful energy shields, and outpace accelerate species. In addition, these beams can also be shot in consecutive blasts and even aid Vilgax in situations that he himself cannot physically take on, such as being held down by Swampfire's vines and Ghost Freak's army of ghouls. He has also gained a breath so powerful he can cause cyclone-like winds that are able to blow out a member of Heatflash species and force multiple enemies to fly back. Now, aside of gaining these powers as well as superhuman senses and flight, he has also taken the equipment of each champion and added it to his already impressive arsenal, like the Sword of Vilgaxia. This mighty blade was forged on Vilgaxia out of an unknown and extremely durable metal that can cut away missiles very fast and sharp, enough to cleave large solid structures as well as shatter chromastone, both done with one single swing. In addition, it also houses some unique abilities, such as projecting very powerful energy blasts, igniting in flames, and setting off massive explosions, and even coating itself in crystals to deflect or absorb energy attacks. Now, the two primary tools that Vilgax has gained through the 10 champions are the Ruby Ray of Ulo and the Shield of Zigal. The Ruby Ray of Ulo is a tight-fitting glove on Vilgax's right hand which possesses a ruby that is capable of producing a very powerful laser beam that can be fired in a precise shot, consecutive blast, and a charged widespread shot that causes a lot of damage. In fact, to get an idea how powerful this weapon is, Vilgax was able to weaken Ultimos with a single shot. And according to Vilgax himself, Ultimos' ability to survive the blast was unusual, meaning most would be killed by it.
I salute you. Few have withstood an assault from the Ruby Ray of Ulo.
Now, the Shield of Zigal is a powerful gauntlet on his left arm that generates a powerful force field which has numerous forms, such as a knight-like shield or a dome to protect his entire person. In terms of its defensive power, it's been able to tank attacks from the likes of Ultimos, Jet Ray's laser blast, and the guns of a spaceship, which he cleaved in half by flying through it with the shield activated, complementing its offensive power. Speaking of offense, the gauntlet can also coat Vilgax's fists with energy like boxing gloves, attack those who are intangible like Big Chill and Ghost Freak, and even tase them in the process. However, there is one more trick up Vilgax's sleeve. Thanks to his squid-like heritage, he can access the natural form of his species, which is a kraken-like creature that he can transform into at will, making him several times deadlier than before. When in this form, he has far greater strength than his normal base forms, can stretch his tentacles very far as a more powerful version of the optic blast, can fly, swim at super speeds, survive the vacuum of space, and at his most powerful when around large bodies of water, because the power of his form rises when in water. Thus, in this quest to become powerful enough to bring the universe to its knees, Vilgax's ability skyrocketed and became pretty much an unstoppable force against most. He's defeated the champions of 10 worlds, as well as conquering dozens of other worlds single-handedly, gone toe-to-toe with an amped-up Ghost Freak while resisting his possession, escaped the Null Void, survived a long period of time in space with no food or water, in addition to the atmospheric re-entry, and even stole the powers of an extra-dimensional god by outsmarting him. With all these accomplishments, he has proven to be one of Ben's most dangerous foes, and has in fact came close to achieving his goal several times to acquire the Omnitrix, as well as defeating Ben. But despite all this power and even acquiring the Omnitrix on 2 occasions, Vilgax is not unstoppable and has been defeated by Ben even when he was at his best in the episode Ben 10,000, and it was against 2 Ben Tennysons, where he had evolved to counter every single alien Ben had stored in the Omnitrix.
You think you can destroy me? I analyzed every one of your aliens and had animal program their moves into my new DNA. Nothing you can do will surprise me anymore.
In addition, his true form, while it's far stronger, it's more vulnerable to attacks, and it also loses all of his equipment, thus sacrificing versatility and defense for more power. And the worst of all, Ben Tennyson once ordered Vilgax a kid's meal.
Burger Shack.
I got you the kiddie meal, so don't let him know you're over 8.
So yeah, it's too bad that Vilgax doesn't complete his goal of universal domination. But regardless, you could try to blow up or seal the Conqueror of 10 Worlds all you want. Vilgax will always come back with focus and determination to accomplish his goal. The universe will tremble before the might of Vilgax.
Underestimating me is a great mistake.
Alright guys, we've run down everything on both combatants.
Now let's get ready for the battle.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Seven months ago, Samus Aran and the Nova Corps had worked together to take down the infamous purple space pirate, Ridley, detaining him into a special imprisonment for life and making sure he could no longer commit any horrible acts upon the universe ever again. However, his forces had invaded in attempts to break their ruler free. Thus, Ridley escapes from the prison and seeks to acquire great power from a shard of Phazon and wreak destruction over Xandar. Meanwhile, a year ago on Earth, Ben Tennyson had unfortunately passed away. Thus, the Omnitrix had been acquired by the safe hands of the Nova Empire. Vilgax, with this realization, again seeks the Omnitrix and sets off for invasion. Days pass, and legions of Vilgax's army descend upon where the device was kept. The Nova Corps does their best to fend off Vilgax and his forces, but they found it more than difficult. Then, dropping from the sky, was a giant spiky ball. Once it crashed, it rolled, rammed through constructs, and crushed civilians in its waking path. It halts near the center of the Nova Empire's main headquarters, opens, and Vilgax himself steps out. Ronman, along with reinforcements, fire at Vilgax. But he never budges and immediately takes them out in one fell swoop, leaving only the corpsemen remaining for interrogation. Ronman gives in, but asks Vilgax to leave and stop the invasion if he allows access. Vilgax agrees and is led inside to where the Omnitrix is. Meanwhile, Ridley and his forces finally arrive, but it appears that invasion had already begun. But not by himself, the god of death. In anger, he swoops down in risk of facing certain death. But that didn't matter. He wasn't afraid, as he had faced death more than once. All he knew was that whoever this is will suffer just as much as Xandar would by his own hand. Ridley soared through the skies and delved down casually through the war zone. It irritated him that he had to deal with a vast, immense army compared to the more primitive forces he usually faces, aside from his arch-nemesis. But Ridley in his own right was very powerful, as well as being a high-advanced cyborg with weapons and armor. Thus, Vilgax's forces seemed mundane in comparison to Ridley. Meanwhile, with the minor threat dealt with, Vilgax continued his stroll into the vicinity until he came across a view outside. His army was retreating. Vilgax grew concerned, not so much for the lives of his reinforcements, but rather what kind of thing could do this much in such a short amount of time, and most importantly, could it stop Vilgax and acquire the Omnitrix? Unfortunately for him, he got his answer in the form of Iran, the leader of the Nova Corps, opening a door, closing it behind her, turned, and in horror saw Vilgax. But then suddenly she was pierced through the chest. In the same moment, the ground bursted open. Then, rising from the floor, was Ridley, who had her impaled and hanging from his middle claw, which he held up to Vilgax and spun her around like a basketball balanced on a player's finger. And with eerie glowing green eyes, he had fixed his gaze on Vilgax while performing this disturbing taunt, as the body ripped through and collided with the bloody floor. Ridley could tell, however, that Vilgax was no joke, as he himself, like Ridley, was vastly large and sensed that there was immense power within him. But that simple taunt from the god of death gave the Green Warlord the impression that words seemed useless. So, Vilgax, letting his actions respond, took Corpseman's head, twisted it facing behind his person, and then let the lifeless body fall over, while not losing eye contact with Ridley. Afterwards, he clenched his fist in anticipation, waiting for the god of death to make a move. They both darted, and at a certain distance, the world seemed to slow to a near halt, as they were about to enter a battle that one or the other would never forget. In the clash of their forward-going momentum, the two hulking behemoths created a shockwave that sent both flying back opposite sides from the building outside. With Ridley halting himself in the air and flying towards Vilgax like a jet, the Green Warlord had brought himself to a halt as well, looked up, and leaped towards the space dragon. In midair, he spotted his purple adversary and pulled back his fist before landing a punch. However, Ridley tackled before Vilgax could land a blow, flying him straight up. Once he reached a far distance up, he spun and shot a beam from his mouth at Vilgax. The force of the blast was strong and sent Vilgax crashing down fast. The impact of Vilgax's huge body crashing could be heard from miles away. The Green Warlord, however, stepped out of the crater with no harmful effects shown. Then a loud screech was heard. Once Vilgax saw his incoming opponent, he rushed forward and pulled back his fist again. Ridley came in heavy with his beak like a spear. However, he missed as Vilgax dodged to his right, wrapped his arm around Ridley's neck to hold the now struggling space dragon in place. Ridley thrashed wildly, trying to move his head closer to Vilgax and fire a shot. But the Warlord's arms were doing the job well. Then, a sharp pain went through Vilgax's arm. Deciding that biting or trying to use his mouth blast wouldn't do, Ridley reached up and plunged his claws into Vilgax's forearm. However, Vilgax's body was entirely composed of tentacles condensing itself into a humanoid form, so his grip never slackened. The god of death, still stirring, begins to thrash more wildly, as Vilgax's grip in a single moment intensifies. Vilgax had activated the steroid boosters implanted in his arms, thus making his already hulking stature larger and stronger. Ridley again attempts to break free by using his fiery shockwave. However, Vilgax was unfazed, so in response, he sent hammer fists down on the space dragon's head, with each one cracking the ground around him. Ridley had then attempted to stab the Green Warlord with the spear-like end of his tail. Vilgax, however, weaved, grabbed the tail, and seized Ridley's lower neck with the other hand, and with a growl, he hefted the god of death off the ground, and with a grunt, he performed a chokeslam. The Green Warlord then raised both fists into the air and come crashing down. However, Ridley was smart and blissed out of the hammering smash. Vilgax stood, looked around, and lost sight of the space dragon. It was almost as if Ridley had disappeared off the face of Xandon. Vilgax sensed, however, that he was close by. So he retracted his steroids and prepared himself. Ridley was capable of camouflaging and started attacking from every angle he could with very quick motion, blitzing Vilgax with attacks that seemed much faster. However, Vilgax was quick to act, as he closed the gap between himself and Ridley by drawing out his sword and blocking with quick swipes from his mighty blade. But, to his surprise, the claws were standing up to the blade's immense cutting power. Ridley was relentless with his attacks, forcing Vilgax to be on the defensive. But despite Ridley's immense speed, Vilgax was more than capable of holding his ground with someone of such speeds. Ridley then exposes himself by setting up his signature tail attack from above. However, Vilgax's acute senses kicked in and immediately reacted by activating the shield of Ziegel. These direct stab attacks performed by Ridley with his tail came down fast and heavy. But despite the immense force and cutting power, these pogo stick-like attacks did no more than bounce off the shield and agitate Ridley. Vilgax deactivates the shield and fires his ruby ray of Ulo upwards towards the space dragon, only for Ridley to tank the blast and slam into Vilgax. However, the Green Warlord remained standing with his sword holding the God of Death back. Vilgax then pushed Ridley back and one fluid swipe of his blade. Ridley jumped backwards. Within seconds, he caught sight of Vilgax and shot a fury of fireballs from his mouth. The fire, however, again, had no effect on the Green Warlord. Now closing the distance, Ridley decides to then rain multi-missiles from his cybernetic person upon his on-foot opponent. Vilgax, still charging, cuts away the missiles with his sword. Ridley continued his assault of missiles until something caught him completely off guard. The Green Warlord had jumped far enough to clear the way and land directly behind the God of Death and shot his optic blast. The blast was homed in on Ridley and was coming in fast. The space dragon, in reaction, flew at top speed, avoided the blast, and quickly got an idea. He flew towards the Green Warlord's direction in a blitz. Vilgax, trying to be unpredictable, fires another barrage of optic blasts towards Ridley's direction. However, his aerial skills allowed him to get behind Vilgax, flipped him, and countered as the blast made contact with the Green Warlord. Vilgax is sent flying as the remainder of his optic blast continues to make contact with his person. Ridley himself gets up and flies towards Vilgax. Vilgax readies to stand, but Ridley rams into his person, tosses him up like a baseball, and smacks Vilgax with his tail upwards. He then flies up once again, following the Green Warlord, locks on and fires his missiles while also charging his plasma beam. Vilgax raised a brow, then went wide-eyed as the next thing he saw was missiles towards his direction. Upon reaching the Green Warlord, the missiles detonate on impact. But then suddenly, Vilgax flew out of the smoke with his shield activated. The distance between the two again closed at an immediate pace. Ridley shot his plasma beam. In a flash of light, it made contact and splashed outwards like water as the barrier shielded Vilgax from the blast of immense energy. When the beam dissipated from the space dragon's clear notice of ineffectiveness, the Green Warlord rammed into his vulnerable chest, and then both crashed into the center of the city. Vilgax was not going to let Ridley stand, for as soon as the God of Death slammed to the ground, the Green Warlord activated the steroid boosters and began to wail on him with furious fist. His punches were like rapid cannonballs, each one hitting harder than the last as they began to be coated with energy. As each time Vilgax made impact to Ridley's chest, it buried him slightly deeper to the ground. To finish off, Vilgax raised both fists into the air in hammer-like fashion, came crashing down, and smashed Ridley. The ground of the entire city almost cracked clear down the center on impact and created a shockwave that shattered almost every single window. Yet, despite the devastating damage Vilgax had dished out, these energy-charged attacks did no more than piss Ridley off. as in response, the God of Death charged upwards from the ground and shot a powerful beam from his mouth to the side of the Green Warlord's face. He staggered to the side, but did not fall. Vilgax turned, put up his gauntlet, activated his shield to block the second energy blast from his purple adversary, grabbed his right wing, pulled back his fist, and delivered a boulder-sized uppercut that sent Ridley catapulting into the air. The space dragon, however, righted himself in midair and within seconds retaliated like a diving falcon. He crashed into Vilgax like a flaming rocket and maliciously began to bull rush in savage fury with his claws. Vilgax, in response, countered by blowing a huge torrent of wind from his mighty breath, slowing Ridley's advance to claw and attack, so he charges another plasma beam shot from his mouth. The Green Warlord then extends his right arm forward. The ruby ray of Ulo glows red and fires a devastating shot, encompassing the God of Death's entire mouth. Then it enlarges and covers his entire person and launches him backwards. Ridley, however, catches himself, stabs the ground with his tail as dozens of stone spikes rocket up, make contact, and send Vilgax flying back himself. Ridley stood up, laughed maniacally at his surprise attack as fire leaked from his muzzle and blasted forward a gigantic river of fire, taking up Vilgax's entire vision. Vilgax, however, flew forward and attempted to plow into the space dragon, thinking he didn't learn the first time. However, when the fire cleared, in front of him was nothing, so he brung himself to a halt as his side slid across the ground. Stood and knew Ridley was using his camouflage again, so he drew out his sword slowly. Meanwhile, Ridley silently rushed forward, bearing his claws, this time imbuing them with electricity, and slashed Vilgax in a frenzy, who was not able to draw out his sword in time. However, it was revealed to Ridley that neither the scratches nor the shocks seemed to faze him all that much. Vilgax then sensed Ridley from behind, drew his sword, and spun in wicked fashion. However, Ridley flew upwards and came down tail first again, performing his famous pogo stick assault. Vilgax began to evade, roll, and then deflect the tail with his mighty blade, which ignited in flames in an attempt to burn the space dragon alive, setting off a massive fiery explosion. As the dust cleared, Ridley laughed and taunted at the ineffectiveness of his fire, as he too revealed that he is also immune to all heat as well, and fired another barrage of missiles at close range. Vilgax tanked all the missiles simultaneously. Ridley fired another blast from his mouth, but Vilgax immediately countered with his optic blast, and the result force-pushed the two titans back, as the buildings around them began to fall and kill all civilians inside and near the devastation. The God of Death in anger fired another blast, while the Green Warlord fired a tremendous beam of energy from his sword. The blast met in the middle, turning everything within the city into vapor and fire. Every living civilian was killed and formed into ashes. The two seemed completely unyielding. However, Ridley was not even scratching Vilgax's defenses. As through the thick of the fight, Vilgax advanced forward as Ridley endlessly went all out and used everything he had to try and slow down the Green Warlord. But either he would be unfazed or he would use defensive tactics to slow the distance quicker. The God of Death in anger and panic had no choice but to engage Vilgax in up-close quarters. Ridley, with a hellish roar, flew upwards to strike the Green Warlord from down below. As the Green Warlord dodged, Ridley crashed to the ground. Then he dashed out with a swing of his tail. Vilgax, however, rolled out of the way, hovered upwards, and shot his optic beam. Ridley tanked the blast with no effect except the sheer force pushed him back. As Vilgax landed, he activated the steroid boosters, leaped, and attempted to smash with both fists coming down again. But Ridley flew backwards and avoided it. Then, the purple space dragon blocked a ruby ray of Ulo blast with his wing before Vilgax attempted to attack again, this time charging forward with his shield activated. The Green Warlord made successful contact with the God of Death's cybernetic person, during which pieces of armor chipped and flew off. Ridley rolled back before halting himself to recover. Vilgax deactivated the shield and charged forward with his fist at ready to punch. But the purple space dragon finally knocked Vilgax into a nearby building as his tail whipped with tremendous force. However, the building is then lifted upwards and flung up into the air towards Ridley. In response, Ridley fires his plasma beam at the incoming building and blasts apart. Afterwards, Vilgax leaps towards Ridley and hits him across the jaw with a perfect straight right punch. The punch causes a shockwave. Afterwards, Vilgax lands more furious punches and dazing his purple adversary. Vilgax then comes lunging forward with his sword and begins repeatedly slashing into the space dragon. Eventually, Ridley is overwhelmed and defeated. Vilgax then states that underestimating him was a grave mistake, the last he would ever make, and goes for the killing blow with his sword. But Ridley, with his back turned to Vilgax, looks up and sees an illuminating blue glow under some rubble. The shaking of destruction around the two combatants makes the rubble move. Then it's revealed to be the Phazon shard that Ridley had been seeking from the start, which rolls towards the god of death, as if destiny told him that he was going to win. His eyes had a spark, and then he finally responded to the Green Warlord by saying that he was correct, that he could not defeat the Conqueror of 10 World. At least not in this state. After his response, he immediately turns, revealing the Phazon to Vilgax with a nightmarish smile. As his chest opens, the Phazon seems to be gravitated towards the center, closed, and his metallic body blackened, and his mind became monstrous as the Phazon kicked in and changed the god of death into something much worse. Omega Ridley, now reborn, emanated a blue aura and a very menacing presence. Ridley roared in rage with a sadistic glee. Vilgax's eyes narrowed, and the left one began to slightly twitch from inner anger and rush towards the enhanced god of death. The Green Warlord charged with unwavering confidence. Vilgax cleaved at Ridley with his sword of Vilgaxia, wanting to blow past him quickly, only to be shocked as the blade glanced off the mighty armor and it staggered Vilgax backwards. Vilgax then flew up, drew out his ray gun, and shot at the reptilian monstrosity, but it had no effect whatsoever. Vilgax quickly figured out that nothing could get through Ridley's new defenses. He had to fight smart and last, if possible. The space dragon instantly dashes by, ramming into the Green Warlord's person. Vilgax slammed back, tries to stand, but Ridley immediately grabs the Conqueror by the torso with one hand, drags the Green Warlord across the ground, flew towards the burning buildings, slammed Vilgax against one, and started bulldozing through them. Ridley then, with Vilgax in his grasp, charges a Phazon shot from his mouth. Vilgax, however, is able to expertly block the Phazon blast with his shield at close range. In retaliation, he brought the shield down, clenched the fist of his gauntlet, punched directly into Ridley's mouth, and produced a massive shock. Ridley screeched in anger, and in response, slashed Vilgax with his claws charged with Phazon energy. The result of the slash were the tentacles of Vilgax's infamous beard had been severed and his chest lacerated. Ridley, however, with some sort of thought and consciousness, assumed that Phazon would corrupt Vilgax into a fellow Phazon entity. But to his surprise, the wound seemed to resist the corruption and effects of the Phazon. As he growls in pain, Ridley drops Vilgax out of his hand while trying to brush off the damage. Vilgax gets up, turns, and sees Ridley being stunned. Thus he leaps, upraises his shield, and charges towards the space dragon once again. The power of the collision created another immense shockwave. Vilgax saw the enhanced Phazon armor skin shielding his chest. Thus he thought back on their battle and realized that his weak spots were his mouth and chest. Even with him being stronger and more durable, he could capitalize on this as long as he could survive. The two landed on the ground standing. Ridley roared, spread out his limbs and wings, briefly jumped up, and smacked the ground with an electrical shockwave of Phazon. Vilgax dodged, coated his sword with diamond-like crystals all across the blade, and charged for the chest. Ridley rushed forward to deliver a massive onslaught, but when he saw Vilgax's sword coming in for a strike, he veered to avoid it, only to find that Vilgax had upraised his shield once again, bashed against his chest, and sent him flying back. Vilgax kept charging forward with his sword and shield up, as Ridley in rage blasted a gigantic river of phazon. Vilgax, however, thought ahead and casted all of the encompassing energy into his sword and charged again for Ridley's chest like a torpedo. The phazon entering the crystals of the blade changed them to a dark purple as it was absorbed. Ridley jumped back and began firing homing plasma balls. A quick dodge or brief attack at the incoming orbs was all he needed to get rid of the plasma balls and close the distance. However, after Ridley had fired the many orbs, he was charging an immense plasma fireball. Vilgax was now within striking distance of the black space dragon, but the blast completely engulfed the green warlord, broke the energy shield he raised, and found himself being tossed away by the sheer force of the blast. Ridley, with savage fury, performed a devastating combo of attacks with his claws, wings, and then a massive tail whip that sent Vilgax flying upwards. The Green Warlord, trying to catch himself in the air, is staggered at the new over-encompassing power of the space dragon who is flying towards him. The God of Death and the Conqueror of 10 Worlds are now in a tangled battle in the air. However, despite Vilgax's efforts, Ridley was too strong, as he again had Vilgax in his grasp, charging another phazon shot from his mouth. As he did, Vilgax shot his optic blast into the space dragon's mouth. This momentarily stuns Ridley and thus begins to fall in response. As the God of Death plunges down, Vilgax gains the upper hand by taking him by the neck, turning him over, pries off the armor plating protecting his chest, and directly stabs him in the chest with his crystal-coated sword charged with phazon. The two then plunge into the ocean on Xandar with a gigantic splash. As the bubbles clear, Ridley regains consciousness, looks around, and sees no sign of his green adversary. So he begins to swim to the surface. But then suddenly, a massive tentacle launches upwards, ensnaring Ridley's ankle and begins to pull him down to the deepest depths. The God of Death looked back and saw red eyes as he was being reeled in. Struggling was pointless, as Ridley could not resist the sheer strength that had drug him down, and came face to face with a colossal squid-like creature as two more tendrils began to wrap around the space dragon's arms, and then another around his leg. A voice is heard, as it states that the God of Death now faces Vilgax's true form, and there is no escape. As the Green Warlord said this, more tentacles began to ensnare the space dragon's limbs and started to squeeze tight. Ridley, in instinct, charges a blast from his mouth, but another tentacle immediately wraps around his neck, leaving the mouth open and exposed. Meson bombs are released as they flow over towards Vilgax, but they have no effect. Missiles were then launched, but it was the same result. Ridley did everything in his power to release the grip and harm Vilgax, but nothing was working. It was as if Vilgax was becoming stronger, and he was. As Ridley struggled, the greater the force Vilgax applied to the limbs as they began to snap and twist in unnatural directions. With the mouth and chest now fully exposed, Vilgax knew he could now target the weak spots he possessed and finish this. As Vilgax fires his optic beams mercilessly, the Green Warlord moves every limb inward to crush the God of Death. Then, with one final blast to the chest, a large light emitted and a massive explosion went off, which caused a giant body of water to splash upwards. With the dust settling, the fire beginning to dim over the destruction of Xandar, and the watery waves calming down, Vilgax washes up on shore. His body now reverted back to its humanoid-like state, but naked of his weapons, tools, and armor. He begins to wake up. As he does, he looks over and sees Ridley's body, also washed up on shore. But it's lifeless. Ridley is dead. A green light then emanates under some rubble. Vilgax, with excitement, crawls over, wipes off the rubble, and is beheld with the Omnitrix itself. Vilgax, holding it up like a shrine, shouts that his destiny is now fulfilled and puts it on. As he does, he can feel the power surging through his body and bonding with him. The Green Warlord then walks over to the lifeless body of the God of Death, scans him, and adds to his list of aliens inside of the device. Then, from the sky, the pirates descend onto the destroyed city of Xandar. As they do, Vilgax takes the form of Ridley as he looks up at the overwhelming sheer numbers. Their leader, their greatest weapon, had been slain by the Conqueror of 10 Worlds, who now possesses the greatest power in the universe. The followers of the God of Death do not avenge, but rather pledge their allegiance to their new master. With both forces now combined, Vilgax reigns supreme. Universal domination begins, and all will be conquered and doomed.
Oh my god, that was so awesome.
So due to the large number of variables, this battle can be discussed for very long periods of time, as both have certain advantages and disadvantages over one another.
Ridley was faster, bigger, smarter, and had a greater variety in his arsenal. But Vilgax was a little bit more powerful, a better combatant, and his arsenal was more potent and reliable for combat.
And by experience, Vilgax had a huge advantage in facing opponents who are not only faster than him, but are also a lot more versatile. Speed-wise, Ridley was massively fast, as he could keep up and outpace Samus's ship, which moves at light speeds. But that's only traversal speed. Combat-wise, we've never seen anything that impressive aside from his aerial skills, which are very awesome, but don't help much in a fisticuffs fight, which is what Vilgax just happens to excel in.
And while Vilgax doesn't fly that often, he has offensive measures for taking on Ben's aliens who can fly, or really just about anything Ridley can do, which Vilgax has encountered. And we know this because of the heroes both Ridley and Vilgax face.
For Ridley, Samus Aran is a very impressive opponent, but as a combatant, she hasn't really changed all that much. Yeah, some new tools or abilities might pop up here and there, but she remains very consistent. And while she does have different armors, they don't so much add new weapons or abilities, but rather are designed for situations and environments, and on certain occasions do increase her power. For Vilgax, Ben went from a very inexperienced boy with only 10 aliens to a true hero who evolved into a far more powerful and versatile combatant with 1,912 aliens. Now, both villains have changed and evolved in their respective series, but Vilgax remains more consistent in his battles with Ben than Ridley does in his battles with Samus. So while this isn't a battle between Samus and Ben, comparing these two are important as they are the primary threats to our combatants.
But let's just say we ignore that and just strictly look at Ridley and Vilgax alone.
Sure, we can do that. So both are very well matched when it comes to scaling, but what made this tricky is that both were too durable for one another to do any damage to each other, except they had one or more exceptions to inflict harm.
Ridley had Phazon, which usually means near instant death to most targets, or at least far greater threat to those like Samus, wearing a suit that makes her more resistant to Phazon and channels its energies. Basically, if Vilgax were exposed to a lot of Phazon, it would possibly kill him.
And attacks charged or coated with Phazon did actually harm him. However, thanks to his endopathy, matter resistance, and extreme immunity to radiation, he was able to hang in there long enough to figure out how to hit Ridley's weak points. Which by comparison means that while Ridley's Phazon was a more deadly threat, it had its drawbacks of slowing him down and losing all strategic thinking, as opposed to Vilgax, who not only keeps a clear mind at all times, but just has the tools to allow him to exploit the God of Death's weaknesses. Meaning he's more likely to exploit those weaknesses, as he would take the fight a lot more seriously.
Yeah, while Ridley is definitely no joke in a fight, he plays with his prey, while Vilgax just slays his foes with no two shits given.
Now, before anyone compares Ridley's K2L ship explosion feat to Vilgax's nuclear bomb defeat, it's first off important to mention that when Vilgax was decimated by that nuke, he was far weaker and could definitely now resist an even more powerful explosion. Some explosions he's been harmed by are also inconsistent, as they were ways for the writers to take Vilgax out of the picture. And we know this because Vilgax has survived similar explosions and stood completely unscathed. Whereas with Ridley, he was severely damaged by the first explosion, but later on in Zero Mission, the self-destruct sequence Samus had triggered put Ridley in such a horrible state that he needed the assistance of the space pirates to recover him and become Meta Ridley.
And the reason why we're only bringing this up now is because we want to look at Vilgax's best feats, and those feats prove he's a lot more impressive than that. And remember, we are combining the cybernetic enhancements and the 10 absorbed champions, meaning he's probably even more powerful than that.
You can also argue that Ridley as Meta or Omega is more durable since those two prior explosions, but our argument is that while he could withstand those attacks directly, he still dies to a character who cannot replicate that kind of destructive power herself. And it's because of those fatal weak spots, like the mouth and chest, that make him more susceptible to being soundly defeated, while with Vilgax, it's not quite that simple. Overall, whether you agree or disagree, Ridley had to put in just as much effort as Vilgax did to even harm the Conqueror of 10 Worlds. And when the purple space dragon just couldn't do enough damage, he would lose all common sense and leave himself open to the Green Warlord's attack methods with his more effective and reliable arsenal. Which, while not as destructive, was a lot more beneficial and perfectly designed to counter anything Ridley threw at him, and ultimately claim a very hard-earned victory.
The winner is Vilgax!
Next time on Dream Battles.
The law is clear. When the seventh seal is broken, 4 horsemen shall ride forth to punish the wicked. You have defiled the law, horseman. You will be punished.
I serve only the council, only the balance, as the horsemen always have. Send me back. I will punish the one responsible.
That's right, guys, War is going to be in the next episode of Dream Battles. Who's he gonna face? Well, from the time this video is uploaded, you'll find out in 7 days. Anyone who guesses War's opponent correctly within those 7 days will get a personal shout out and link to your personal content in the reveal trailer for War's opponent. Anyway, if you are new here to Dream Battles, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed what you saw, drop a like, share, and comment below for more videos just like this one. Also, don't forget to ding-dong that notification bell so you don't miss anything. Oh, also, in the description are my buddies Zassuralnor, Gigabyte Gaming, and the guys at Death Battle Plus Plus on Facebook. These guys are like brothers to us in the Dream community, which is also linked below, and just like them, we support every step of the way as well in return. In addition, I want to give a huge thanks to GG Music for providing the music for Ridley and Vilgax's battle. The music is absolutely solid, and I'm super thankful. And lastly, a huge thanks to my buddy Jacob for collabing with me on this episode. This is a huge opportunity for him, so give the guy a round of applause for doing a great job. If you guys want to check out how to playlist, his channel is linked below. Go support Dreamers. MikeG off your screen. Stay tuned for the next episode of Dream Battles. See you guys soon.